My name is Erin, 32 years old, and I'm standing frozen at my daughter's 7th birthday party, watching my mother cruelly mock a deaf child's sign language. The child's face crumbles as guests laugh nervously. Just as I move to intervene, our elderly maid, Rosa, steps forward with trembling hands, pulls out a faded photograph, and says 8 words that drain all color from my mother's face. "This is your sister's son, you're mocking Margaret." Before we dive into this shocking revelation, let me ask, where are you watching from today? Please hit that like button and subscribe if you want to hear how family secrets can shatter everything we thought we knew. What would you do if you discovered your parent had hidden an entire sibling from you? Share your thoughts below as we uncover how one birthday party exposed 40 years of lies. Growing up in our sprawling Connecticut estate, I learned early that appearances meant everything to my mother, Margaret. Our colonial home sat perfectly manicured on 5 acres, its white columns and black shutters photographed regularly for charity galas and society pages. Every blade of grass measured precisely, every flower arrangement calculated for maximum impact. Behind those pristine walls, however, lived a different truth entirely. My mother, Margaret Whitmore, stood as a pillar of our community, organizing charity events that raised millions, sitting on hospital boards and hosting elaborate fundraisers that attracted senators and CEOs. Her perfectly coiffed blonde hair never moved out of place, her designer suits pressed to perfection, her smile practiced and cold. She wielded kindness like a weapon, dispensing it only when cameras pointed her way or when influential people watched. At home, that warmth evaporated faster than morning dew under harsh sunlight. My father, Richard, existed as more shadow than man. His presence felt mainly through the expensive gifts that appeared after Mother's particularly cruel episodes. A successful investment banker who left before dawn and returned after dark, he mastered the art of selective blindness. When Mother's voice turned sharp enough to cut, he retreated to his study, bourbon in hand, classical music drowning out the reality of his choices. He loved me, I think, in the only way he knew how, through trust funds and private schools, and a determined ignorance of what happened in his absence. The preparation for Lily's 7th birthday party began weeks in advance, with Mother inserting herself into every decision. A Whitmore party set standards, she declared, overriding my simple garden party idea with plans for catered hors d'oeuvres and a string quartet. She scrutinized the guest list like a general planning battle strategy, questioning every name, demanding to know parents' professions and social standings. "You can't just invite anyone, Erin. These connections matter for Lily's future." I wanted to protest to remind her that 7-year-olds cared more about cake than connections, but years of conditioning kicked in. The words died in my throat as they always did, replaced by a weak nod and silent compliance. My husband James watched these interactions with growing concern, his jaw tightening each time I surrendered to her demands. "She's our daughter," he reminded me gently one night. "This should be her day, not your mother's social showcase." But breaking free from Margaret Whitmore's gravitational pull required strength I hadn't yet found. Rosa Gutierrez had witnessed it all, 40 years of service, making her as much a fixture as the grandfather clock in our foyer. Her silver hair pulled back in the same neat bun, her kind eyes holding secrets. She never spoke. Rosa moved through our home with quiet efficiency. She'd raised me more than my own mother had, sneaking me cookies when Mother restricted my diet, teaching me Spanish lullabies when nightmares woke me, holding me when Mother's words cut too deep. Rosa knew where all the bodies were buried, metaphorically speaking, though sometimes I wondered if perhaps literally too. The morning of the party arrived with typical Connecticut summer perfection. The rental company transformed our backyard into a pastel wonderland, complete with a bounce house, Mother deemed tacky but necessary for modern expectations. Lily bounced with excitement, her dark curls wild despite Mother's attempts to tame them, her joy infectious enough to temporarily ease my anxiety. She'd invited her entire class plus several neighborhood children, including Noah, the deaf boy, who'd moved in 3 months ago with his mother, Sarah. Sarah Chen presented everything Mother typically rejected: a single mother working class, driving a decade-old Honda instead of the expected luxury SUV. But Sarah radiated warmth and authenticity that drew people naturally. Lily had immediately bonded with Noah despite the communication barrier, learning basic signs and developing their own hybrid language of gestures and expressions. Watching them together reminded me what genuine human connection looked like, unfiltered by society's hierarchies. As guests arrived, Mother positioned herself as the gracious hostess, air-kissing women she gossiped about viciously and complimenting children she privately criticized. "How lovely to see you," became her refrain, though her eyes constantly scanned for social opportunities and potential slights. She commented on every detail. The cake wasn't centered properly, the balloons looked cheap. Why had I allowed Lily to wear that dress instead of the one she'd bought? Each observation delivered with a smile that never reached her eyes. Each word carefully chosen to wound while maintaining plausible deniability. The first sign of trouble came when Noah arrived, Sarah guiding him through the crowd with protective care. Mother's entire demeanor shifted, her body stiffening as if someone had dumped ice water down her spine. "Who invited them?" she hissed, grabbing my elbow with manicured nails that dug deep. "That's Lily's friend from school," I explained, trying to extract myself from her grip. Her face contorted briefly before resuming its public mask, but I caught the flash of something darker, something that went beyond her usual snobbery. "That child," she said, loading the words with disdain, "will disrupt everything. How will he participate in games? What if he has an episode?" The assumptions and cruelty packed into those questions made my stomach turn. But before I could respond, she glided away to whisper with Mrs. Hamilton, the country club president. I watched the poison spread as Mrs. Hamilton's expression shifted from polite interest to uncomfortable concern, her gaze finding Noah with new wariness. The stage was set for disaster, and I stood paralyzed by my own cowardice, unable to stop what I sensed coming. The party progressed with the mechanical precision Mother demanded, children rotating through activities on her predetermined schedule. But beneath the orchestrated, fun tension built like storm clouds gathering. Noah tried earnestly to join the other children, his bright eyes following their movements, his hands occasionally forming signs that went unrecognized. Most kids made efforts to include him, children possessing the natural acceptance adults systematically train out of them. But their parents watched with the calculating gazes of those measuring social risks and rewards. The breaking point came during what should have been a simple moment of childhood joy. The children gathered around as Lily prepared to blow out her candles, their excited chatter filling the air. Noah stood slightly apart, signing something beautiful and elaborate to Lily, his face glowing with the pleasure of celebrating his friend. That's when Mother struck, her voice carrying across the yard with practiced projection honed through years of commanding attention at social gatherings. "Oh my goodness, look at this performance!" she exclaimed, her tone dripping false amusement. She raised her hands in a grotesque mimicry of Noah's signing, flapping them wildly while contorting her face into an exaggerated expression of confusion. "Is he having some sort of fit? Should someone call a doctor?" The words landed like physical blows, each one carefully calculated for maximum damage while maintaining the thinnest veneer of concern. The laughter that followed wasn't genuine mirth, but the nervous titter of people unsure how to respond to cruelty dressed as comedy. Some adults genuinely chuckled, revealing their own prejudices, while others shifted uncomfortably trapped between social pressure and basic human decency. But the children, those barometers of authentic emotion, fell silent, instinctively recognizing the wrongness of the moment. Noah's transformation devastated me more than any words could. His animated expression crumpled like paper crushed in a fist, confusion giving way to comprehension as he realized he was being mocked. His hands dropped to his sides, the beautiful signs he'd been forming dying mid-gesture. Tears welled in his eyes, not the angry tears of childish frustration, but the deeper hurt of recognition, of understanding that he was being marked as different, as less than as something to be ridiculed. Mother, emboldened by the nervous laughter, continued her performance. "Maybe we should get an interpreter," she suggested with false brightness. "Though I'm not sure they make them for whatever this is." She waved her hands more wildly, adding stomping feet to her cruel pantomime. "Is this how they say happy birthday in deaf? Such fascinating customs these people have." The word "these" carried weight, creating distance, establishing Noah as fundamentally other. Several parents joined in following Mother's lead, like hyenas following a lion to a kill. Mrs. Peterson attempted her own mocking signs, while Mr. Bradford loudly wondered if special children should attend normal parties. Their children, reading the room with the terrible accuracy of the young, began imitating the adults. Small hands flapped in mockery, innocent faces twisted into cruel imitations. The poison of prejudice passing to a new generation before my eyes. I stood frozen, my body refusing to obey my screaming conscience. Every fiber of my being demanded I intervene, defend this child, stop this cruelty. But 32 years of conditioning held me in place, the invisible chains of a lifetime spent appeasing my mother stronger than my moral outrage. Shame flooded through me, hot and bitter, as I watched Noah try to maintain his dignity while surrounded by mockery. My daughter Lily looked between her grandmother and her friend, confusion and distress warring on her face, and still I stood silent, failing both children through my cowardice. Sarah rushed toward her son, her face a study in controlled fury and protective instinct. She signed rapidly to Noah, while wrapping an arm around his shoulders, her body language screaming defiance at the assembled crowd. The contrast between her fierce love and the casual cruelty surrounding them struck like a physical blow. She spoke to Noah in soothing tones, but her eyes blazed as they swept across the adults who'd participated in his humiliation. James moved toward the situation, his expression dark with anger I rarely saw from my gentle husband. He stepped between Noah and the mocking adults, his presence creating a small zone of safety. "That's enough," he said quietly, but his voice carried steel that made several people step back. Mother's eyes narrowed at his intervention, her mouth opening to deliver what I knew would be a cutting response designed to put him in his place. But before she could speak, movement from the house caught everyone's attention. Rosa emerged from the kitchen doorway where she'd been overseeing the cake service. Her usual composed demeanor had vanished, replaced by something I'd never seen in 4 decades of knowing her raw, righteous fury. Her hands trembled, not with age or fear, but with the effort of containing rage too long suppressed. She walked toward our group with determined steps, reaching into her apron pocket as she moved. The crowd parted instinctively before her approach, something in her bearing commanding respect despite her position. She stopped directly in front of my mother, their eyes locking in a battle of wills that seemed to stretch time itself. Rosa's weathered hand emerged from her pocket, holding a photograph, yellowed with age and worn soft from handling. The silence that fell was complete, even the children sensing the magnitude of the moment unfolding. "Margaret," Rosa said, her voice carrying the weight of decades. "I have held my silence for 40 years. I have watched you destroy and diminish, wound and belittle. I have seen you crush spirits and break hearts, all while wearing your mask of charity and grace. But this ends now." She raised the photograph, her hand steady now with purpose. "This child you mock, this beautiful boy you dare to humiliate, he has more right to be here than you know. This is your sister's son you're mocking, Margaret. Emily's grandson. The family you tried to erase has returned." The color drained from Mother's face so completely, I thought she might faint. Her perfectly painted lips moved soundlessly, no quick retort or cutting response emerging. The photograph trembled in Rosa's extended hand, and in that moment I realized my entire life had been built on foundations of lies. The silence following Rosa's declaration was absolute, broken only by the distant sound of a lawnmower from some oblivious neighbor's yard. Mother stood frozen, her face cycled through expressions I'd never seen her wear. Shock, fear, and something that looked almost like grief before hardening into defensive rage. The assembled guests watched with the horrified fascination of witnesses to a car crash, unable to look away from the unfolding drama. "You're talking nonsense," Mother finally managed, her voice lacking its usual commanding tone. "I don't have a sister. This woman is clearly senile, making up stories. Someone should check if she's been drinking." But her attempts at dismissal fell flat, the tremor in her voice betraying her. Everyone could see the truth written in her panicked eyes, in the way her hands clutched at her pearl necklace like a lifeline. Rosa stood unmoved by the attempted character assassination. She turned the photograph toward the crowd, revealing a faded image of 2 young girls, perhaps 10 and 8 years old. One was unmistakably my mother, her blonde hair and sharp features unchanged by time. The other girl had darker hair and gentle eyes, her hands captured mid-sign, frozen in an attempt to communicate with her sister. The resemblance between them was undeniable, the same nose, the same chin, siblings, despite my mother's denials. "Her name was Emily," Rosa continued, her voice steady and clear. "Born deaf into a family that saw her as a stain on their perfect image. Your grandparents, Erin, they were prominent people concerned with bloodlines and legacy. A disabled child didn't fit their narrative. She paused, letting the words sink in. But Emily was brilliant, creative, full of life. She could have thrived with support and love. Instead, she got Margaret as a sister. Mother attempted another protest, but Rosa raised her hand for silence with an authority that surprised everyone, including me. This woman who'd served our family for 4 decades, who'd been background to our lives, suddenly commanded the stage with the power of truth. I was young when I started working for the Whitmores, but I remember everything. How you tormented her, Margaret. How you'd hide her hearing aids, mock her signs, convince your parents she was dangerous, unstable. You were 11 when you told them she tried to push you down the stairs. It was a lie, but they believed their hearing daughter over their deaf one. The photograph passed from hand to hand among the stunned guests, each person examining the evidence of a erased life. Sarah held Noah closer, her expression cycling between horror and dawning recognition. Emily Chen, she whispered the name carrying weight. My mother-in-law. She died before I could meet her, but my husband spent years searching for her family. He had so few pictures, just stories from the foster homes after she aged out of the institution. Institution? Mother spat the word like poison. It was a specialized school for her own good. My parents made the best decision for everyone involved. But her justification rang hollow, the pretty euphemism unable to mask the ugly truth. She'd begun backing away from Rosa, from the photograph, from the truth, closing in around her like a tide. Rosa produced more evidence from her apron letters in childish handwriting documents that crinkled with age. These are the letters Emily wrote home begging to return. Your parents never answered, but they kept them hidden in the attic with guilt they couldn't quite discard. She wrote about missing her sister, about hoping Margaret would visit, about the cold rooms and cruel treatments. She was 12, 13, 14, alone and abandoned, still believing her family might want her back. I took one of the letters with trembling hands, recognizing the Whitmore family crest on the yellowed envelope. Emily's handwriting was careful, precise, the words of a child trying so hard to be perfect enough to earn love. Dear Mother and Father, I read aloud, my voice cracking. I promise to be good if you bring me home. I won't use signs at the table. I won't embarrass you at parties. Margaret. I'm sorry for whatever I did wrong. Please forgive me. The other children here cry every night. I try to comfort them, but my signs make them more scared. Please come get me. Love, Emily. The gathered crowd had transformed from party guests to jury, their faces reflecting horror, disgust, and growing anger. Several mothers pulled their children closer, as if protecting them from the poison of such cruelty. Mrs. Hamilton, who'd earlier supported Mother's mockery, now stepped deliberately away, distancing herself from association. The social edifice Mother had built began crumbling in real time, brick by painted brick. She aged out at 18, Rosa continued relentlessly, thrown into a world she'd been given no tools to navigate. But Emily was resilient. She found the deaf community learned to thrive despite everything stolen from her. She married a wonderful man, had a son, built a life of love and meaning. She became a teacher, helping deaf children avoid her fate. She died at 45 from cancer, but not before making her son promise to find her family someday, to understand why she'd been thrown away. Sarah spoke, then her voice strong, despite tears streaming down her face. My husband spent years searching. He hired private investigators, combed through records, followed every lead. He died 2 years ago, never finding them. But I continued his search for Noah's sake, for the grandmother he never met. We moved here 3 months ago because I'd finally traced Emily's birth certificate to this town. I had no idea we'd move next door to her family. No idea the woman who mocked my son was the sister who destroyed his grandmother's life. The weight of revelation pressed down on the party like a physical force. Children stood, forgotten, cake melting in the sun, decorations mocking in their cheerfulness against the backdrop of exposed cruelty. I looked at Noah, seeing Emily in his gentle eyes, in the graceful movement of his hands, in the resilience that let him stand tall, despite the humiliation he'd endured. My cousin, I realized with a start. My family hidden and denied, but family nonetheless. Mother made one last desperate attempt at control. Even if this fantasy were true, it changes nothing. I was a child. I can't be held responsible for decisions my parents made. This woman, She gestured dismissively at Rosa. Has clearly been planning some sort of revenge, probably hoping for money. It's elder abuse, taking advantage of a confused old woman's delusions. But her voice had lost its power, her words falling flat against the mountain of evidence and the testimony of truth. I want nothing from you, Rosa said with dignity that made Mother look small and shabby by comparison. I've saved my money for 40 years waiting for this moment, not for revenge, but for justice. For Emily, who deserves so much better. For Noah, who deserves to know his grandmother's story. For Erin, who deserves to know the truth about the family that shaped her. And yes, even for you, Margaret, though you'll never understand that. The truth sets everyone free, even those who built their lives on lies. Father appeared at the edge of the crowd, home early from golf. His confused expression quickly shifting to shock as guests filled him in with whispered explanations. I watched him process the revelation that he'd married a woman who'd hidden an entire sibling who'd built their life on such a fundamental deception. His face aged years, in moments the comfortable blindness of decades stripped away in the harsh light of truth. With the initial shock beginning to fade, Rosa unleashed the full truth with the precision of someone who'd waited decades for this moment. She spread more documents on the party table, pushing aside paper plates and birthday decorations to make room for evidence of systematic cruelty. Bank statements, legal documents, medical records, each piece adding another layer to the horror story of Emily Whitmore's erasure from existence. Your parents weren't just wealthy, Margaret, Rosa explained, her voice carrying across the silent yard. They were meticulous record keepers. They documented everything, including their younger daughter's supposed deficiencies. But they also documented your complaints, your demands that she be sent away. You were old enough to know what you were doing. 11, 12, 13, and every year more determined to be an only child. She produced a journal, leather-bound and official-looking. Your mother's diary. Would you like me to read the entry where she describes your ultimatum, how you threatened to hurt yourself if Emily wasn't removed from the home? Mother lunged for the journal, but James intercepted her with gentle firmness. Let her finish, he said quietly. We all need to hear this. His support gave me strength. I didn't know I needed his presence anchoring me as my world tilted off its axis. He'd married into this family without knowing the depths of its darkness, and I saw him recalculating everything he thought he knew about his mother-in-law. Margaret convinced them Emily was dangerous, Rosa continued, opening the journal to a marked page. Listen to your mother's words. Margaret showed us the bruises again today. She insists Emily caused them, though the child seems incapable of violence. But Margaret is so distraught, threatens such terrible things if we don't act. Richard believes we must prioritize our normal child. The Fairfield School has agreed to take Emily. My heart breaks, but what choice do we have? Margaret needs to feel safe in her own home. Those bruises, Margaret. We both know you gave them to yourself. The assembled crowd had become witnesses to a Greek tragedy, unable to leave, despite the discomfort of such intimate revelations. Several people filmed on their phones the modern instinct to document drama, overriding social niceties. Mother's carefully constructed world was being broadcast in real time, her humiliation as public as the humiliation she'd inflicted on Noah mere minutes before. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. But sending her away wasn't enough, was it? Rosa pressed on. When your parents died in that car accident, Emily was 22, legally entitled to her inheritance. But she didn't know they were dead. No one told her. You made sure of that, didn't you? Paid off the institution to say she'd run away, that they'd lost track of her. Then you claimed the entire estate as the sole surviving heir. She produced legal documents, probate records, showing a single beneficiary where there should have been two. Sarah gasped, clutching Noah tighter. The private investigator found records of a trust fund in Emily's name, but it had been dissolved. He couldn't understand how that was possible without her signature. Her voice turned hard. You forged it, didn't you? You stole from your own sister while she struggled to survive on the streets. Mother's mask finally cracked completely. She was better off without the money, she snarled, abandoning all pretense of innocence. What would someone like her do with wealth, waste it, squander it on her defective kind? I used that money to build something meaningful, to create the charitable foundations that help thousands. I made the Whitmore name mean something instead of letting it be tainted by disability. The confession hung in the air like poison gas. Even those who'd initially sided with her recoiled from such naked prejudice and greed. I heard someone whisper, "Monster?" and wasn't sure if they meant mother or were simply stating fact. The woman who'd raised me, who'd shaped my understanding of right and wrong, stood revealed as someone who'd built her life on the suffering of her own sister. Rosa wasn't finished. Tell them about the letter Margaret, the one that came 5 years ago from Emily's son searching for his mother's family, the one you burned in the fireplace while I watched. He was so polite, so hopeful, explaining his mother had died, but hoping to connect her grandson with his extended family. You laughed as it burned, said it was better to let sleeping dogs lie. My father spoke for the first time, his voice hollow with shock. 5 years ago? But that was right after Lily was born. You knew we had family searching for us while our daughter was growing up without cousins, without... He trailed off, the implications washing over him. Every family gathering where he'd mentioned wishing I had siblings to give Lily cousins' mother had comforted him about our small family, all while knowing Emily's son was desperate to connect. The cruelty compounds, James observed quietly. Each choice building on the last, creating a pyramid of pain. How many lives were altered Emily's son growing up without extended family? Noah without his heritage, Erin without her aunt and cousin. Generational trauma spreading like ripples from a stone thrown in still water. The party guests began fragmenting, some leaving quietly with murmured excuses, others staying to witness the complete destruction of Margaret Whitmore's carefully constructed life. Those with children tried to shield them from the ugliest revelations, but damage was already done. They'd seen trusted adults mock a disabled child, then watch those same adults exposed as supporters of something far worse. Innocence lost couldn't be recovered with cake and party favors. There's more, Rosa announced, producing a final folder. Your charity work, Margaret, the Whitmore Foundation you're so proud of. Did you know Emily became a special education teacher? That she dedicated her life to helping deaf children receive the education and support she was denied. She even tried to get a grant from your foundation, once not knowing her own inheritance funded it. You rejected the application personally, didn't you? I have the records. You recognized her name and made sure she got nothing, not even from the money you stole from her. This final cruelty broke something in the crowd. Mrs. Peterson, who'd earlier mocked Noah's signing, burst into tears. My nephew is autistic, she sobbed. The Whitmore Foundation funded his therapy program. To think it was built on... She couldn't finish, fleeing toward her car with her confused daughter in tow. Others followed the exodus, becoming a flood, as people distanced themselves from the taint of association. Mother stood increasingly alone, even father stepping away from her side. Her designer dress seemed to hang differently, as if the exposure of her true self had physically diminished her. The powerful woman who'd commanded rooms and controlled narratives had shrunk to human size, petty and cruel and utterly without defense. She looked around for allies, for anyone to support her version of reality, but found only condemnation in every face. You want to know the saddest part? Rosa asked, her voice gentle now with pity. Emily forgave you. In her final letter to her son, she wrote about hoping you'd found happiness, that maybe sending her away had given you the life you needed. She chose love over bitterness, built a beautiful life despite everything you took from her. She won, Margaret. Despite your best efforts to destroy her, Emily won. She knew love gave love was loved. Can you say the same? The exodus of guests had left only the core players in this family drama. Father stood apart, his face a study in dawning horror as he processed decades of deception. James kept protective arms around both Lily and me, while Sarah maintained her dignified position with Noah, who watched everything with those expressive eyes that reminded me so painfully of the aunt I'd never known. And Rosa, our quiet constant, stood triumphant in her truth-telling, finally unburdened after 40 years of carrying secrets that weren't hers to keep. I found my voice at last, 40 years of suppressed anger and pain crystallizing into clarity. All those years, I began my voice stronger with each word. You made me feel defective for showing compassion. Every time I cried, you called me weak. Every friend you drove away because they weren't good enough, weren't connected enough, weren't perfect enough. You weren't protecting me. You were recreating your childhood crime, weren't you? Eliminating anyone who might make you look less than perfect by comparison. Mother turned on me with vicious intensity. Everything I did was for you to give you advantages to ensure your success. Look at your life, your beautiful home, your successful husband. Would you have any of that if I'd let you follow your bleeding heart, if I'd allowed you to settle for less? You should be grateful, not standing there judging me for decisions made before you were born. Grateful. The word tasted bitter. For what? For teaching me to stay silent when people are hurting, for showing me how to value connections over character, for demonstrating that love is conditional, something to be earned through perfection and withdrawn for any flaw. I gestured toward Noah. I stood there and let you mock an innocent child, my own cousin, because you trained me to prioritize your approval over basic human decency. That's your legacy, Mother. Cowardice disguised as social grace. The confrontation I'd avoided my entire life was happening at my daughter's birthday party, surrounded by melting ice cream and deflated balloons. The incongruity might have been funny if it weren't so tragic. Lily watched wide-eyed, trying to process why her party had transformed into this adult drama. I knelt beside her, needing her to understand what she'd witnessed. Sweetheart, what Grandma did to Noah was wrong. Very wrong. And we've just learned she did something similar to her own sister long ago, which was even worse. Sometimes adults make terrible mistakes, and sometimes they keep making them instead of saying sorry and fixing things. I looked at Noah, then back at my daughter. Noah is family we didn't know we had. He's your cousin, and he's perfect exactly as he is. Lily's face lit up with the simple acceptance children possess naturally. Noah's my cousin? Real cousin. When I nodded, she broke free from James and ran to Noah, signing family and love with the basic signs she'd learned. The pure joy on Noah's face as he signed back as he realized he was being claimed and celebrated, rather than mocked, brought tears to everyone's eyes except Mother's. How touching, Mother sneered. Enjoy your moment of self-righteousness, Erin. But when the consequences come, when Lily suffers for your association with them, remember you chose this. I've spent 40 years building the Whitmore reputation. You're destroying it in a single afternoon. For what? For people who share a little blood, but nothing else. For a woman who will probably ask for money now that she knows who we are. Sarah spoke with quiet dignity that made Mother's accusations seem even pettier. I want nothing from you except acknowledgement of what you stole from my husband's family. Noah deserves to know where he comes from, to understand his grandmother's strength. We didn't move here for money or revenge. We came searching for connection, for roots, for the family stories every child deserves. Instead, we found you. And what a disappointment that must be. Father said, his voice heavy with disgust I'd never heard directed at Mother before. 40 years of marriage, and I'm just learning I married someone capable of this cruelty. How many other lies, Margaret? What else have you hidden? What other family members have you erased? Do I even know who you really are? Mother turned on him with familiar venom. Don't you dare stand there pretending innocence, Richard. You enjoyed the life my decisions made possible. The country clubs, the business connections, the social status that opened doors for your career. You never questioned where it came from, never wondered why my family was so small, never pushed when I said I had no siblings. Your ignorance was as deliberate as my silence. Perhaps, Father admitted with painful honesty. I chose not to see because seeing would have required action, and action would have disrupted our comfortable life. But that ends now. I won't be complicit anymore. He moved to stand with our group, the physical separation speaking volumes. We need to discuss many things, Margaret, starting with reparations to Noah for what was stolen from his grandmother. Reparations! Mother laughed, the sound sharp and ugly. For what? For saving this family from scandal, for preventing our bloodline from being tainted, I regret nothing. Emily was defective, her grandson is defective, and if I had to choose again, I'd make the same decision. At least now you all know where you stand. I won't pretend anymore. I won't act like that boy is anything but a burden his mother should have prevented. The naked hatred in her words shocked even Rosa, who'd witnessed decades of Mother's cruelty. Several people gasped, and I heard Lily ask James why Grandma was saying mean things about Noah. But for me, the mask's complete removal brought strange relief. Here was the monster I'd always sensed lurking beneath the charitable facade, finally visible for all to see. No more gaslighting, no more subtle manipulations disguised as concern. Just pure undisguised bigotry. You're right about one thing, I said, finding strength in clarity. Now we know where we stand, And where I stand is with Noah and Sarah, with the family you tried to erase, with the values you tried to kill in me but never quite managed to destroy. Where I stand is teaching my daughter that love isn't earned through perfection but given freely to all who need it. Where I stand is as far from you as possible. Mother's face contorted with rage. You ungrateful child! I gave you everything, and this is how you repay me, by choosing them over me, by humiliating me in front of everyone. You're just like your weak father, always taking the easy path of sentiment over strength. Fine, choose them. But when you come crawling back, when you realize what you've thrown away, I won't be there. You're no daughter of mine. I haven't been your daughter for a long time, I realized aloud. I've been your project, your accessory, your extension, but never your daughter. Daughters are loved for who they are, not molded into reflections of their mother's ambition. Daughters are allowed to fail, to be imperfect, to show compassion without being called weak. Rosa was more mother to me than you ever were. The mentioned woman stepped forward, placing a gentle hand on my shoulder. You were always stronger than you knew, Mija. It just took the right moment to show it. She turned to Mother one last time. Your parents' will, the real one before you altered it, left the house, to both daughters equally. I have the original in a safety deposit box along with evidence of the forgery. You've been living in Emily's house all these years, raising your daughter in rooms that should have welcomed her too. The revelation about the house proved to be Mother's breaking point. She flew at Rosa with nails extended, screaming incoherently about servants knowing their place and consequences for betrayal. James intercepted her easily, his gentle restraint only emphasizing her loss of control. She writhed in his grip, designer dress, tearing perfect hair, falling in disarray, the carefully constructed image of Margaret Whitmore dissolving into the reality of a woman consumed by hatred and exposed in her crimes. Call the police! She shrieked. This woman has stolen from me, planted evidence, turned my family against me. Elder abuse, fraud, defamation. I'll see her in prison. I'll see all of you destroyed. But her threats rang hollow, the desperate flailing of someone who'd lost all power. When she realized James wouldn't release her, that no one was rushing to her defense, she went limp, hanging in his grip like a discarded marionette. Father took charge with the quiet authority he'd abdicated for decades. James, please help Margaret to the house. She needs to calm down. His use of her first name instead of his usual dear spoke volumes. Rosa, I'd like to see all the documentation you have. We need to contact our lawyer, not for Margaret's threatened lawsuits, but to begin making things right. Sarah, I hope you'll allow us time to process this and determine appropriate reparations for what was stolen from Emily, and by extension from Noah. Sarah nodded graciously, her dignity throughout the ordeal, putting Mother's behavior in stark relief. We need time too. This isn't what we expected to discover. Noah needs to understand what happened today in a way that doesn't make him feel responsible for causing pain. Children internalize adult conflicts, and he's already endured enough. She signed to Noah, who'd been watching everything with those expressive eyes, and his small face relaxed at whatever reassurance she provided. The remaining guests dispersed quietly, the birthday party transformed into something none of us could have imagined. Lily, with the resilience of children, asked if we could still have cake. The normalcy of the request broke the tension, and we found ourselves gathered around the birthday cake in surreal domesticity. Noah signed happy birthday again, and this time everyone watched with appreciation for the beauty of his language, the grace Emily had passed to her grandson, despite never meeting him. Over the following days, the scandal exploded through our social circle with predictable velocity. Margaret Whitmore, philanthropist and social leader, exposed as a fraud who'd built her charity empire on stolen inheritance. The story had everything society gossips craved: family secrets, disabled rights violations, financial crimes, and public humiliation. Phone calls flooded in, some offering support, others fishing for details, many distancing themselves from the taint of association. Mother barricaded herself in the master bedroom, emerging only to hurl threats and accusations. Lawyers were called, accounts were frozen, investigations launched. The Whitmore Foundation Board convened emergency meetings as donors demanded explanations. The carefully constructed edifice of Margaret Whitmore's life crumbled with breathtaking speed, each revelation pulling down another pillar of her reputation. Father moved into the guest room and threw himself into researching Emily's life with the dedication he had once reserved for financial markets. He discovered she'd been a remarkable woman despite the obstacles placed in her path. Awards for teaching excellence testimonials from students whose lives she'd changed, articles she'd written about deaf education. She'd married a linguistics professor who specialized in ASL, raised a son who became an advocate for disability rights, created the family she'd been denied. She even tried to find Margaret, Father told me one evening, his voice thick with emotion. The private investigator found records of her search in the early 90s. She hired someone to look for her family, not knowing they'd declared her dead. The investigator hit the same walls Sarah's husband did years later. Margaret covered her tracks well. He showed me a photo. The investigator had found Emily as an adult, radiant, at her wedding, surrounded by the deaf community who'd become her chosen family. The legal ramifications unfolded slowly but inexorably. The original will Rosa had preserved proved Emily's claim to half the estate. The forgery Mother had used to claim everything was clear, now under professional scrutiny. Criminal charges were filed for fraud, though the statute of limitations complicated prosecution. The Whitmore Foundation faced intense scrutiny, its legitimacy questioned, given its origins in stolen funds. Major donors withdrew support, and calls for its dissolution grew louder. I filed for a restraining order after Mother's threats escalated to disturbing levels. She blamed everyone except herself, constructing elaborate conspiracies where Rosa had masterminded 40 years of deception to destroy her. The woman who'd once commanded rooms with her presence now ranted to empty walls, her audience reduced to lawyers who billed by the hour for listening to her grievances. Sarah and I met regularly as the legal complexities unwound. What began as necessary coordination evolved into genuine friendship, the family connection we should have always had. She shared stories of her late husband, of his search for his mother's family, of raising Noah with the values Emily had passed down despite her traumatic childhood. I learned sign language with dedication I'd never applied to Mother's approved activities, discovering a beautiful visual world of communication. Noah and Lily became inseparable, their bond untainted by the adult drama surrounding them. Watching them play together, creating elaborate games that seamlessly blended spoken and signed language, I glimpsed what might have been if Emily and Margaret had been allowed to grow up as loving sisters. Children adapting naturally to each other's needs, finding joy in difference rather than division. Rosa officially retired, but remained part of our lives by choice rather than obligation. She'd saved carefully over the decades, her loyalty to our family matched by practical preparation for this moment. I stayed to witness us, she explained. Someone needed to remember Emily to ensure truth survived Margaret's lies. Now my job is done, but my love for you remains, mija. You were never her daughter in spirit. You were mine and Emily's, and everyone who saw your gentle heart and hoped it would survive your mother's influence. The house felt different with Mother gone lighter somehow, as if her presence had been pressing down on the very walls. We opened windows she'd kept closed, played music she'd deemed inappropriate, invited people she'd considered beneath us. Lily's laughter echoed through rooms that had known too much. Silence, too much judgment, too much careful control. The house Emily should have inherited became what it always should have been, a home filled with love rather than a showcase for artificial perfection. Father began the complex process of calculating what Emily's descendants were owed. It wasn't just about the money, though the sum was substantial. It was about acknowledgement, justice, and creating the family legacy that should have existed. College funds were established for Noah, donations made to deaf education programs in Emily's name, and the Whitmore Foundation restructured completely to focus on disability advocacy with Sarah on the board of directors. 6 months after the birthday party that changed everything, our lives had settled into new rhythms. The scandal had faded from hot gossip to cautionary tale, replaced by fresher dramas in our social circle. Mother resided in a small apartment across town, her world shrunk to the few loyal friends who believed her version of events, and the lawyers still untangling decades of financial manipulation. She'd made no attempt to contact us, her pride stronger than any desire for reconciliation. Father completed the divorce proceedings with minimal contest once Mother realized the extent of evidence against her. He seemed lighter now, no longer carrying the weight of willful blindness. I loved who I thought she was, he told me during one of our weekly lunches. But that person never existed, did she? I fell in love with a performance and spent 40 years applauding an actress who never broke character until the final curtain fell. Sarah and Noah had become central to our reconfigured family. Sunday dinners included signing lessons with Lily, proudly demonstrating new vocabulary while Noah patiently corrected our clumsy attempts. The language barrier that Mother had mocked became a bridge connecting us more deeply than shared genetics alone. James learned technical signs for his engineering work, discovering deaf colleagues he'd never thought to connect with before. Our world expanded in ways Mother's narrow vision never allowed. I started volunteering at the deaf school where Emily had hoped to teach before being rejected by the Whitmore Foundation. The irony wasn't lost on anyone Margaret Whitmore's daughter working to undo damage caused by Margaret Whitmore's prejudice. But I went by my married name now, distancing myself from the legacy of cruelty while working to build something better. The children taught me patience, resilience, and joy in communication that transcended spoken language. The Whitmore Foundation, under new leadership and Sarah's guidance, transformed from vanity project to genuine force for change. Emily's story became part of its mission statement, acknowledging the harmful origins while committing to restorative justice. Grants went to programs Margaret would have scorned, supporting inclusive education, disability advocacy, and family reunification services. The Foundation's rebirth from the ashes of its corrupt beginning felt like Emily's ultimate victory over the forces that tried to erase her. Rosa published a memoir about her years serving wealthy families, carefully disguised but devastating in its portrayal of privilege, corrupting human decency. The chapter about Emily brought renewed attention to the historical treatment of disabled children, the casual cruelties of institutions, the families who chose reputation over love. She donated proceeds to establish a scholarship in Emily's name, ensuring deaf students could access the education Emily fought to achieve. Noah thrived in his new extended family. The isolation Sarah had feared for him replaced by cousins, grandparents, and great-aunt Rosa who competed to spoil him. His confidence bloomed in an environment where his deafness was simply part of who he was, neither hidden nor highlighted, but accepted as naturally as Lily's brown eyes, or James's terrible puns. He began teaching sign language to his classmates, becoming a bridge between deaf and hearing worlds, just as his grandmother had dreamed of being. The birthday party photos from that fateful day remained on our walls, though carefully edited to exclude certain moments. We couldn't erase what happened, but we could choose which memories to preserve. Lily remembered it as the day she gained a cousin, not the day her grandmother revealed herself as a monster. Children have that gift, focusing on joy over trauma, finding light in the darkest moments. I struggled with forgiveness not for Mother's sake, but for my own peace. Therapy helped untangle decades of manipulation, the subtle ways she'd shaped my worldview to mirror her prejudices. Every assumption I'd carried about success, worth, and belonging required examination. The process was painful but necessary, like resetting badly healed bones so they could finally mend properly. My therapist specialized in family trauma, and even she was stunned by the layers of deception Mother had maintained. Forgiveness doesn't mean reconciliation, she reminded me during one difficult session. You can release the anger without inviting harm back into your life. Your mother made choices from her own trauma and limitations, but understanding the why doesn't excuse the what. Protect your peace and your daughter's innocence. That's your only obligation now. Father surprised us all by enrolling in ASL classes at the community college. At 65, he struggled with the visual nature of the language, his hands stiff from decades of typing rather than signing. But he persisted with determination that revealed the man he might have been if Mother hadn't overshadowed him. I want to talk to Noah properly, he explained. I want him to know his grandfather tried to bridge the gap his grandmother created. The legal settlements concluded, with Noah receiving what would have been his grandmother's inheritance, plus interest held in trust for his future. Sarah initially resisted wanting justice rather than money, but Father insisted. It's not charity or guilt money. It's Emily's legacy, what she earned by right of birth, and what Margaret stole through deception. Noah deserves his grandmother's share of the family fortune to use for college or starting a business or whatever dreams he develops. It's the very least we owe Emily's memory. We held a memorial service for Emily on what would have been her 62nd birthday. The deaf community attended in force former students, now adults, who shared stories of the teacher who'd changed their lives. We learned about Emily, the poet Emily, the advocate Emily, the mentor who never mentioned her painful past but used it to fuel compassion for struggling students. Noah signed a poem his father had written about searching for family, and there wasn't a dry eye in the chapel. Mother sent a letter that day, delivered by her lawyer. I recognized her handwriting on the envelope and almost threw it away unread. But curiosity won, and I opened it to find a single paragraph of continued denial, blaming everyone but herself, predicting our downfall without her guidance. I showed it to my therapist, who suggested keeping it as a reminder when doubt crept in, when the trained part of my brain whispered that maybe I was being too harsh, too unforgiving. The letter's vitriol proved the necessity of maintained distance. As I write this, Lily and Noah are in the backyard practicing for their school's talent show. They're performing a song together, Lily singing, while Noah signs their joy infectious as they navigate both languages with the fluid ease of childhood. They've chosen Somewhere Over the Rainbow, which feels fitting given Emily's love of old movies, according to newly discovered journals. Watching them, I see the future Emily dreamed of, where differences are celebrated rather than hidden, where family means choosing love over fear. The greatest tragedy isn't what Mother did to Emily, though that alone would suffice. It's what she denied herself through hatred, the love of a sister, the joy of nieces and nephews, the richness that comes from embracing rather than erasing difference. She sits alone in her apartment, surrounded by the ashes of a reputation built on lies, while we gather in the warmth of truth finally spoken. She won by her definition, getting the money and status she craved. But we won by any measure that actually matters, finding each other across decades of deception. Sometimes the greatest gift isn't what we're given, but what we're finally brave enough to take the truth, however painful, and the freedom it brings. Emily never got to come home, but her grandson plays in the yard that should have been hers, loved by the family that should have been his all along. It's not perfect justice, but it's a beginning. And beginnings, I've learned, matter more than the endings others try to write for us. Thank you for joining me on this difficult journey of family secrets and ultimate redemption. If this story resonated with you, if you faced similar family revelations, or struggled with speaking truth to power, please share your thoughts in the comments below. Your stories matter, and you're not alone in dealing with complex family dynamics. Please remember to like this video if it touched your heart, subscribe to our channel for more powerful family stories, and hit that notification bell so you won't miss our next upload. Share this video with someone who needs to hear that it's never too late to stand up for what's right, even against those we're supposed to love. What would you have done in my position? Would you have spoken up sooner, or do you understand the paralysis that comes from a lifetime of conditioning? Let me know in the comments. Until next time, remember that your voice matters. Your truth deserves to be heard, and sometimes the family we choose is stronger than the family we're born into. Stay strong, stay kind, and never let anyone make you feel less than for showing compassion.